My name is Chandra, and I work at the Penticton Museum, and the Brown Bag Lecture has been running for over 30 years, and so it's always fun to try and see who can we pull from the community to talk about things that they've done or that they know about. And so today we have Tina Hoeben, and Tina is a resident of Penticton, longtime resident. Some of you may know her as one of the coaches with the KISU Swim Club. And so she went on this big trip on her canoes, the Yukon River Quest. Thank you, I was going to say challenge, but quest. And so she's going to tell us about that. Before she does that, can you take your phones and just turn them off? And then I'm going to hand it over to Tina. She's going to tell us all about it. And yeah, without further ado, here's Tina.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks everyone. I really appreciate everyone being here. And I'm just going to dive in. I'm going to make one correction to the intro. It was not a trip. It was a race. So here's just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Summerland. We moved there when I was 10. And I did a bunch of other things and finally decided that the best place to live was in the Okanagan. So I moved back. And I've been a resident of Penticton since 1998. I'm the head coach of the KISU Swim Club and have been since 1998. And I've been paddling outrigger canoes. They are down on Skaha Lake as part of the Dragon Boat. They're joined with the Dragon Boat Society now, and I've been paddling since 2001. Done a bunch of races, but definitely the longest race I've ever done is this race, the Yukon River Quest, and I've done it 4 times now, 2012, 2015, 2017, and now this year, 2023. There, a little bit about the race. It's 715 kilometers long, so it's a long race. We do have one thing in our favor in that the river is traveling in the same direction. So there's a little bit of a push from the river, but it is a long race nonetheless. The very first time I did this race, my sister you can watch, they have you linked, and so you can watch where the boats are on the race. And I was nervous. It's the first time I was doing this race. It's a big thing. So one of my sounding boards, one of the people I talked to a lot about what I was worried about was my sister. And she went on the map to look at how we were doing. And we were at the back of the pack. We were the farthest boat north, or not the farthest boat, but we were in the back of the pack. Because all the rivers in BC run south. So we were actually at the front of the pack instead of the back of the pack, because this river runs north. So it runs from, well, we get on it at Whitehorse, and it runs all the way to the Arctic Ocean through Alaska and everything. It's a much longer river than the section we did. We go from Whitehorse to Dawson City. And you might remember, I remember learning about it in grade 5, that the gold rush and Dawson City was the center of that, and that is all part of the history of that route. So there's a lot of history of that gold rush in that area. The race runs 24 hours. It starts at 9 a.m. and runs, there's a couple of mandatory stops, or one, and then it finishes when you get there. So one of the things we have in our advantage is that it's daylight 24 hours. So they run it at close to that equinox solstice, that time of year when it's daylight for 24 hours. And so we're never actually paddling in the dark. It is mandatory, you have to have some lights, but they're much more about people being able to see you from a further distance than you being able to see where you are on the river. So there's lots of logistics to doing a race this big, and we had the advantage of having a support crew. Not all the paddlers who are racing have a support crew, and there's ways around it, but I have always raced with a support crew and been very grateful for their help. So they are a big help and asset at the beginning when you're preparing, and at the end when you're done, and they help clean everything up. And also there's a stop in the middle where your support crew assists as well. So it's a huge asset to have a couple of people who are basically your mom taking care of you when you are tired and weary. There's also, as you can imagine, there's a big safety component to this. So there's a bunch of mandatory gear that you have to have. And in fact, you have to have a sleeping bag, a stove, a tent, and so you have to carry all this stuff, even though we've never used it. But you can get out there and dump your canoe and you're on land, or maybe you just really need to lie down, and they make you have all this stuff, because if they do have to come rescue you, it might be 24 hours before they get to you. So you have to bring all this mandatory gear. And that's part of the safety. They just changed their insurance. They had to cancel a race like 2 days in advance in 2021, just coming out of COVID. And so they've changed their insurance now. So at the safety meeting, they made it very clear that we were in charge of our own safety. They are not there as our safety net. We are in charge of our own safety. They do have, what part of that mandatory gear is that you have a device that will link to them so they know where you are at all times. And if you've stopped for a while or stopped for a long time, then they will start to, the latest one, they were able to communicate short sentences back and forth, so they would check in on you. So there is some safety. There are a variety of different boats that are allowed in this race. So kayaks and canoes, either solo versions of those or two-person versions of those, as well as Voyageur canoes, which is what I raced in, which are big canoes. I think I have a slide coming up. And also in the last few years, they've allowed stand-up paddle boards as well. So that's a long way for that, to be standing and balancing and eating and all those other things you need to do. So, yeah. And they won't let outrigger canoes in because they want to stick with, I don't know how the stand-ups got in. They want to stick with boats that have their origin in Canada. So the kayaks and the canoes are both from here, the Voyageurs are from here, but somehow the stand-ups got in. So the boat is very important. The Voyageur, that's what I've raced in. The category allows for 6 to 10 paddlers, and depending on the boat, some boats fit 10 and some boats fit 6 or somewhere in between. And as you're paddling, you actually change sides. So we would paddle, I would say 30 seconds, maybe a minute at the most, and then get over to the other side so that at least you were making both sides of your body equally sore by the end. And what was I going to say about the changing of sides? Depending on the width of the canoe, you might slide over, or if you're at the front or the back of the canoe, you might not need to slide over because the rails of the canoe, the gunnels, are that right at your side. But sometimes it's quite wide, so you have to slide back and forth. And when you slide back and forth, you are shifting your weight to the other side of the canoe. So you need to make sure that the other people in the canoe are shifting their weight to the other side of the canoe. You have to make sure that all happens at the same time. So there's a bit of the boat really matters. In 2012, it was my first time doing this race, and I was kind of the key organizer of it. And I knew enough to know that the boat matters. So I dug around a bit. Sorry, I'm going to go back because I didn't want to be in one of these boats. These boats are great for paddling down the river with a group of people you don't know very well, who might have a variety of different paddling speeds. And if one person slides over to the other side of the boat, there'll be a bit of a wiggle, and maybe you'll be on a slight lean, but you're not going to topple over. These boats are very safe. They are awesome if you are going down the river and it's not a race. But we were in a race. So 2012, my crew was mostly from Penticton. It was great. We trained a lot for it. Tyson Bull, who's also from Penticton, was our mentor. He had done the race a few years earlier with his dad and inspired us, and we started training on Thanksgiving weekend the year before. And when it got too cold or the lake froze over, we went to the pool and sat on the edge of the pool and paddled with our paddles. And yeah, there's nothing like doing something for the first time because it's all so new and so exciting and somewhat scary. I tracked down a boat that was from a boat manufacturer called KISU, and the owner of that boat, Martin, was our second mentor. He had done the race a number of times and had won it at least once in a very tight race over that distance. It's pretty impressive. So we had these two different people giving us different information, and lots of it very valuable. And when Tyson did the race, his goal was to beat one of the local Yukon teams who were very experienced. And they were the breast cancer survivors team, so paddlers abreast. And he was racing with just his dad, so it's a different dynamic when you're racing with just two. So that was their goal, was to beat paddlers abreast. When we raced, we made that our goal as well, to beat these women who had done it many times before, were very experienced, knew the river, all of that. So that was our goal. And in preparing for the race, once we got to Whitehorse, we took the boat for a test run with Martin, the boat manufacturer, the guy who made the boat. And we told him of our goal, that we wanted to beat paddlers abreast. And he just looked at us and he was like, this boat is going to beat paddlers abreast. We had no idea that the boat itself was that much better, that as long as we were steady in our paddling, we were going to beat paddlers abreast. There had been a big debate within our team as to whether we would stop. So when Tyson did it, it was raining. They hadn't intended to stop, but it was raining. And so when they got to the end of the lake, I'll go through more of that part, but the end of the lake, before you get onto the river where it's a bit cooler, they got on dry clothes. Paddlers abreast actually stopped there and made a warm meal so that they were ready for the next section, which could be a bit cooler. So there's a big debate on our crew whether we would stop or not. These two teams that we had a lot of trust in had stopped, so of course we should probably stop. Who do we think we are? We're not that better, much better than them. So when we discussed with Martin our idea that we would stop and just refuel, we actually did a practice run where we made oatmeal and ate it within 10 minutes of hitting the shore. We made the oatmeal, we ate it, and then we got off because we were not going to waste any time. When Martin heard that we were going to stop, he was like, no, you are not going to stop. Once you get back on that river, the river itself is moving you along at between 5 to 10 kilometers an hour. If you get off of it for 15 minutes, you've just lost kilometers. So stay in the boat, take a break. You can get changed and you can eat a lot of food. You can bring a thermos if you want something warm. But don't get off the boat, don't stop on the shore. So those were a couple of things that were really key, and lots of great advice we got from those people who were mentoring us in that first year. Were very, had a big impact. This was our boat. So you can see it has much lower gunnels, and the design of it is much narrower so that it slips through the water easier with less resistance. This is all of our mandatory gear. Our boat was a gong show of stuff. There's lots of those sleeping bags in the tent take up a bunch of room. You have to have spare paddles. You have to have food. It's a festival of food. It's a buffet out there. You've got to have all kinds of food and water and all of that. So that was our boat that first year. This is the lineup. You can't really see our boat because the front of it doesn't go up. It's hidden behind those two white boats. But I was very impressed with this boat. This was another boat that Martin made. It was being paddled, it had won the race previously, and it was being paddled by a crew of men from Australia. And they came there, their jackets actually had embroidered world record challengers. They came there full of bravado and they had planned their race. It was a big deal, both the flight to us from Australia and all of that. And if you could see, I have another slide coming up next. They actually have a tripod at the front on the bow of their boat to take video of them while they're racing. They had a speaker system, they had GPS at the front and GPS at the back, and they were totally decked out. I took more pictures of them. This is the front of their boat, they've got their flag. This is the back of the boat. The steersperson has a little deck where they have their map and they have their beverage. And yes, it was very impressive. The first night at 4 a.m., I think, when it was 4 degrees out, they flipped. So that boat is called the Precipice, and it is a tippy boat. So then you've got these 6 guys and they're upside down and they get to the shore, the US boat passes them and they get themselves collected, but they lost the speaker at the bottom, the GPS at the bottom. I'm not sure if they lost their maps, the tripods, GoPros, long gone. Men's teams who had raced from Texas. There's an equivalent race in Texas called the Texas Water Safari. And so these Texans had raced the Yukon a number of years. If you win the race, you get your entry for the following year paid for. So they came back multiple years. And in fact, they designed and built boats to race in. So this is one of their boats that they raced in, and it can take 10 people. So you can see that's a Suburban, and you can see how long it is on both sides of that Suburban. So this is what it looks like. This isn't all the seats, but some of the middle seats have sliders, so you can slide. You sit in your little tractor seat, and you can slide back and forth on rails. The middle 2 seats there that aren't sliders, when we paddled it, we had only 8 paddlers, so we left those middle 2 seats empty. There was 4 at the front and then 4 paddlers at the back. And yeah, so it was a beast of a boat. It was fast, but it was also like, it's so long, so that it didn't always go. The steersperson said it was a bit harder to handle just because of the length of it. That's us at the finish that year, and it was cold and a bit rain. It had rained just before we came into the finish, so that's us at the finish that year in that big beast of a boat. In 2017, someone had bought that Texan boat, so we couldn't paddle it. And so we had our crew, we had 6 people in our crew, and I couldn't find a boat. There was no boat to be had that we could paddle except for the Precipice. So we had to pay, you rent those boats, and the entire rental fee for the Precipice went to the storage people who had stored it for the past 5 years because it hadn't moved. And I was incredibly nervous. I had St. Christopher in my life jacket, and I was like, oh my God, what if we flip? I don't even know what you do when you flip. I do now, but I didn't then. And, you know, I've got not just me to worry about, but I've pulled all these people into this event, and we're in a very tippy boat. Some of my fellow paddlers were marathon paddlers, which are also very tippy two-person boats, and they were experienced and they were confident that we would be okay. But yeah, no, it was very much a concern of mine. Anyway, we paddled it, and we raced quite well, I think. I always forget our placings, but I think we might have been 5th overall and 3rd Voyageur, or 2nd. Oh yeah, they put the C4s, they just allowed 4-person canoes, and those 1 or 2 of them beat us. So I think we were 5th overall and 3rd in the Voyageur category. But no one had expected a group of women to do that. It's usually the men that are, and maybe the mix that are fighting for those top categories. So yeah, it was pretty exciting. And then we had planned to go again in 2020, and the precipice had been bought. So yeah, we didn't get to race in 2020. And at this point, I forgot to mention how the cruise evolved so that it was me still being the major organizer for them, but we had pulled in some of my friends from other races who were, they were American, and they knew more paddlers than I did, so they pulled in fellow Americans. So now it was me and 5 women from the US. I just want to talk a little bit about the days before the race. So they have this list of mandatory gear, but they actually check. They want to see that you have a sleeping bag that's rated for -5. They want to check that you have a first aid kit that has all these different things in it. They want to check that everyone has a life jacket with a whistle, with a bivy sack, one of those, you know, the aluminum foil kind of heat blankets, where you had to have like a little sleeping bag like that, and it had to be attached to your life jacket. You need to have matches and fire starter attached to your life jacket. In case you tumbled out and were without a boat, you could at least get to land and keep yourself somewhat warm. So the food is also a whole big discussion of what we're gonna eat. It's not the same as Ironman, where they have their, you know, drinks and their gels and all of that. This is a much longer race, and at some point your tummy doesn't want to have another gel. And as well, you're kind of in a different training zone where your body can handle and digest food while you are exercising. So it can handle food that's more normal. But when you're exercising that hard for that long, sometimes you don't feel like eating. So it's good to have a big variety of food and to steal from your teammates if something of theirs looks more appealing. And it's, yeah, the food is a big topic of discussion to figure out what you're going to eat, and you need a big variety. You also need to think about things that might go wrong, like Pepto-Bismol, Imodium, Tylenol, Advil. You need to have a little bit of a personal first aid kit with all those kinds of things. I am really good at falling asleep, and I fall asleep sometimes when I'm driving. I've become much better about pulling over and doing things and all of that. So this year, I in my job as a coach, have run across a nutritionist, and I asked her, what can I take to keep me awake? So she recommended this military gum, which was designed by the US military to have the equivalent amount of caffeine as a cup of coffee. So I don't drink coffee, so coffee was not one of my go-tos. But I tried out this military gum with the caffeine to try and keep me awake. And it was successful for the first day, not as successful in the second day. We did a test run with our boat. So we were in the precipice again, and we did a test run. This is a photo, and one of the reasons that I go to the Yukon, because it's very beautiful. And that test run, we had a new steersperson, and she was lovely person. She's manager, and you could just see all those manager kind of skills. Like, she just took care of people. But when she was in the boat, she swore like a sailor. And I was just like, whoa. The first the test run in that boat was very intense. It was windy. The boat is designed to go straight down that river, but we were in a lake and we had to do corners to get around, so it was very difficult for her to steer. And when we slid from side to side, sometimes the timing was off. We all came out of that test run a little bit shaken and very much concerned about how we were going to do in the race. Packing the boat is also a big thing. You need to find places to put the things that you're not going to need, except in the case of an emergency. So where do those sleeping bags and the tents go? But also things that you want to have on hand. Where's your water? Where's your food? So that it's easy. You'll eat more if it's right in front of you. And where is your toque if it gets cold? But where's your sun hat if it gets warm? All of those things need to be thought about, where you're going to put them in the boat and all of that. So that's what we did in the days before the race, just figuring all that out. The boat we used, because the precipice after we used it, in 2017 it was bought, but then this guy in the Yukon is just building up some inventory of boats. So he bought 2 precipices, and we were the inaugural crew to paddle in it, and we actually had to take it out of the plastic. Like, it was brand spanking new. So this is us trying to, it's balanced on a couple of foamy things, so it's not on the gravel and the ground, because we want to protect all that carbon fiber from getting beat up. But we're just trying to figure out how we're gonna place our stuff and work on all that kind of stuff. Oh, and our competition going into this race, I was looking at the list, and I thought, oh, we might do okay. We were unfortunately, or fortunately, a mixed crew, in that we had 5 women, and we couldn't find a 6th. So one of the women had been training with this guy, and she said, oh, he's getting pretty good. He can beat me now. She is a very fast paddler. And so anyway, we brought Andrew in, but that made us a mixed crew, 5 women, 1 guy, and we're still in the mixed category. And I thought we had a shot at maybe doing well within that mixed category. The field was not that deep, and I thought, oh, maybe. But there was a men's crew that I thought wouldn't be beatable. They were experienced men in their 20s from Australia, and I thought, yeah, but there's probably no way we can beat them. When we met the owner of this boat, he said, oh yeah, you guys have a good shot at being the first voyageur. And I'm like, really? What about that Australian crew? He said, probably not. And then I saw them, and seriously, they were like 6'4", 6'6", big men. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what he's talking about. Those guys look pretty intimidating. And then on the very first morning, we were setting up our canoes, and I walked by them, and I was like, oh, we're gonna beat them. Because they had paddles that were like plastic handles, metal, and then big, ugly plastic blades. Yes, there's a few paddlers in the crowd that was being like, what? The paddle is as important as well, maybe not as important as the boat, but think of how many paddle strokes you're gonna take over 700 kilometers. It's a lot. You don't want a heavy paddle. The paddles that we're using are super light, all carbon fiber, and I must have not been the only person that walked by these guys with these paddles. because before they raced, someone had gone back to the rental store and gotten them proper paddles. I think they used those ones for spares, but they had paddles, but they didn't know enough about paddling to get paddles at the beginning. I did speak, and they were in one of those big tanks of a boat, so I was like, oh, we might have a shot at beating them. I did speak to them, and they are very accomplished water people, but they were rowers. They were not paddlers. Two of them, in fact, paddled across the Atlantic. So they had a pretty impressive resume, but not paddling. So this is us at the start. You would think that a paddling race would start on the water, right? But the water is moving, so it's hard to line everybody up for the start. And can be a lot of boats. We raced and there's 65 boats, but they take up to 100. It wasn't a huge year, I think just coming out of COVID, and they canceled that race. It's a big commitment. So this year was 65 boats. But you can't, starting 65 boats on a moving river at the same time is a difficult task. So they start us 400 meters away. There's a big start banner and a big countdown, and the mayor comes out and wishes us all luck. And then you have to run to the start line. And I don't run. I have a bad ankle and I really can't run. So some of my teammates as well had, a bad knee or something. But so I did manage, we managed with the help of Celebrex and adrenaline, to have a slow jog to the start of the race. But there are people there who, this is their chance to be at the front of the race. They are running, they are sprinting, you have clear water, you don't have to. It can be a bit chaotic. It definitely was for us, that other boats are in your way, you're trying to pass them, they're trying to pass you, now there's 3 boats and you're in the middle of them. It can be a bit chaos at the beginning of the race. So we started, I think middle of the pack. This is my sister's video of the race start. We are, I believe, that boat right above there that has 6 people in it. I'm gonna play the video, but it does have some sound and it starts with woohoo, somebody next to my sister yelling. So there you go. So that's us. We're just starting to get into the chaos of it all. So again, I think we started middle of the pack. Right there, we're about to pass that kayak, and we're like, yes, we passed them. And our stroke person, Kathy, is this incredibly strong woman. She just always amazes me with her strength. She used to be the fastest outrigger paddler in Northern California. Our steers person, Chance, is a very experienced steers person and used to be the fastest outrigger paddler in Southern California. So they used to be rivals, but they're dear friends now. And I don't know that you would have noticed, but our stroke rate is very slow at the beginning. Kathy was very intentional in, we're not gonna try and win this race off the start. It's a long race, and our chances of winning are slim anyway, so we're just gonna pace ourselves and not go too fast off the start. Nonetheless, when that woman puts a little bit of oomph to her paddle, she doesn't have to say anything to the rest of the boat. Everybody just felt it and we could go. And we got into a couple of tight spots where it was like, let's get out of here, let's go. And when she recruited Chance, the steers person, Chance asked about the navigation. How do I know where to go? And Kathy said, oh, don't worry, just follow the paddle at the boat in front of us. So about 20 minutes in, we're like, where's the next boat? We passed a bunch, we passed the Aussie guys. I was like, oh, that was quick work. And it took us a while to realize that we were actually in first place. So I was not expecting that, certainly not that early in the race. I thought, well, we're older women, we're a bit tough. Maybe we'll beat somebody just based on their speed and prowess at the beginning, but we'll get them, we'll be the turtle come up at the end. So I wasn't expecting, none of us were expecting to be doing that well at the beginning of the race. The race starts with a section on the Yukon River that's moving quite quickly. I think it's about 30 kilometers long. And then you hit Lake Labarge from the poem, that Robert Frost poem, Lake Labarge. So I don't have any photos from the lake. In my previous 3 races, I did have some photos. I just couldn't find them in time for this. And I didn't take a single photo, and I'm the little photographer at the back taking the pictures. I didn't take a single photo on the lake because the first time in all my races, it was rough. So we had this really big ride on the lake. The first part was okay, it was just some ripples and you could feel that there was some wind. But by the time we got to the end of the lake, we were not calling the changes every 30 seconds to a minute. They were being called when people thought, okay, if we call it right now, we're not gonna get hit by a wave, because that's when you're changing, is when your boat is a bit wobbly and you wanna make sure you can get to the other side and not be hit by waves as well. So we tried to surf some of the waves, like take them at an angle and surf them, but it just didn't really work that well. We did maintain our first place, standing by the end of the lake, so that was great. And there were boats that did flip on the lake, and they are very specific about where you go on the lake, in that you're not allowed down the middle. It might seem like it's faster to go down the middle, but they push us to the side at the very beginning, and then it's just as fast to stay on the side, and then you're always close to shore. So anyway, no photos of the lake. But the lake is 50 kilometers long, so by the time you get to that, you've got 80 kilometers in, and we were very grateful to get to the next section, which is, there's a section called the 30-mile river, and it's called like the museum, the river museum, because we didn't see a lot of it, but you can see the occasional boat wreck, like from the gold rush, and they used to run a lot of different boats up and down here. And it's a beautiful section. The river is fast and it's calm, and you just keep going and you feel like, whew, we're doing well. And you're still a bit fresh. They started the race at 9 a.m. Usually in the previous races it started at noon, but you're still quite fresh here. But it is the land of the midnight sun, so I think this is like 11 p.m. And then the sun did tip down a little bit, and then we got a moon. It was a full moon, so the moon came up. So it's pretty beautiful, I would have to say. That's one of the reasons I do the race, is to get into this isolated place where you know there's not a lot of people around. The population of the Yukon is the same as the population of Penticton. And 20,000 of those people live in Whitehorse. So once you get out of Whitehorse, there's not a lot of people. You really are out there. So in the race, in the past, there's been 2 mandatory stops. One is 7 hours long in a city, town, village called Carmax. And then the second one was at a gold mine further on. This year, I'm not sure why, but they couldn't get access to the gold mine. So we had a 10-hour stop at Carmax. So we came into Carmax, this is what we looked like. I think it was like 6 a.m., it was pretty early. We were pretty wrecked, I have to say. We got off that boat, and I don't know what was going on, but all of us were fine in the boat, and then we got up, and we were just like, whoa. Not nauseous, not feeling sick, but super dizzy. It was like being drunk, but like, and not for like, okay, sit down, get up, sit down, and now I've got my bearings. It was like in the shower later, you gotta hold on to that safety bar to wash your hair, because we were all really dizzy. So I don't know if it was the lake, that's when we got tossed around the most. I didn't get a chance to talk to other crews if they experienced it as well. But yeah, we were really dizzy. So this 10-hour break, this is when our support crew comes charging in, and they help us get, well, they're not allowed down on the dock. People help us get out of the boat because you've just been sitting for a very long time, and it's not easy to move. Your legs aren't working as you wish they would. So they get us out, we get some food in, they take us to our hotel. We booked a hotel. There's camping option, but I've always gone for the hotel. That was Tyson's advice at the beginning, and it's been a good advice. So we go to the hotel, get showered, get fed, go to sleep. That 10-hour break was glorious. This is our support, this is our whole crew. This is the only picture I could find we took of everyone. So this is everyone. My sister was the support crew for me, and then my friend Kathy, the very strong paddler, brought both her partner and her nephew. So we had 3 people helping us out. The 10-hour break was great. When we left Carmax, I was like, oh, thank goodness, this is the way to go. 10 hours is definitely, you just had enough time to, really settle and get back on there and feel like, not $1 million, but maybe 250,000. So this is us. We are still in first place, and we did not expect it. So there's a little bit of pressure. Kathy has her game face on, and yes, we're moving forward. There's a couple of rapids in the race, and they make a big deal of them, as they should, because this is where people flip. So this is us going through Five Finger Rapids. We were very fortunate that Kathy's nephew is a photographer. You don't normally get a photo like this of you going through that water. So it was very cool that he got this photo. Not only did he get that, but he also got this video. So. This is a drone. Yeah. So here we're catching a bit of the rapids, of those standing waves. Yes. Totally. Our steers person was like, I'm on it, am I on it, I'm on it.
Is she intentionally cutting across?
Yes. They give very good directions in terms of where to go. And I think you're supposed to come in there, but there's an island, so we came in behind the island. Yes, yeah. So, then there's another set of rapids further, about an hour later, that are called Rink Rapids, and you can hear them from far away, but they're all on the left side. So all you do is stay on the right, and it's like paddling through, no problem. So the navigation is a big deal, but the basic principle is just stay with the water that's going down. Just keep going with the flow of the water. At one point, the Pelly River comes in. It's just above Carmax there, this Pelly crossing. I think the Pelly River, probably comes in there. And there's a story of a crew that got to that junction, and they actually started paddling up the river. I don't know how they didn't notice, but people, you get a lot of fatigue. So you do have to keep your wits about you to some degree. All right. There was only one checkpoint in this whole second half of the race, which was like a little bit, usually there was multiple ones, and we had our little stopping 3-hour stop. We did I wouldn't say we got lost, we just didn't know where we were, which maybe is the same as getting lost. But we knew where we were going, so at one point we just kept like, let's just keep going with the flow of the river, and the mountains and the little islands are so repetitive that we really didn't know where we were until we got close to a gold line, and then a big helicopter came in, and I was like, this is significant. So we knew when we hit that gold line that that's a place where there's obviously money if you could fly in the morning with your helicopter. There's also a point in the second half of the river where it joins, or it doesn't, this other river comes in called White River. And after White River, you're not allowed to drink the the river water anymore. There's just too much sediment in it, and I don't know what that sediment is, but it must not be good for you. And this year, the White River was really low, like way lower than it had been in the past. And it was something that happened way up in the White River. The source of it is a glacier, and the glacier has melted back enough that there's a 100-foot canyon of rock exposed, and so now it's sending the water in a different direction. The water is no longer coming towards the Yukon, it's going out towards Alaska, way up there. So there's a rafting company on that other side that can no longer do the rafting because the water is so high, and there's a lake on this other side where people's houses are way too far back from the lake because the water has all changed. So I thought it's called river piracy. So it's just a little interesting note. But after this White River, you start hitting the river. First of all, the river is the white and the murky Yukon mix, so now it's definitely murky, whitish stuff. But there's a section that floods every year, and every year different islands get formed and other islands get torn up, and there's trees. It just reminds me of like a war zone. There's all kinds of stuff all over the place, and there's all these islands all the way through. So it can be a bit challenging to navigate. And at this point, we've been through some nights that were cold. Like I had on my wool stuff and pants over my pants and all these layers. But it was also getting very, very hot. In Dawson City, the following day, it was 30 degrees. Which was like, oh my goodness, how does it get this hot up this far north? But it was really hot conditions, the hottest I've ever had. I struggled in this section. I was taking way too much of the caffeine gum. So then my stomach was upset, and then I was feeling like I had heat stroke. And you get to a point where you're like, we're almost there. And there's 4 hours left. And let me tell you, 4 hours at the beginning versus 4 hours at the end, those 4 hours feel very different. Those 4 hours at the end were very long, but we made it. We did get past. Well, this was just in my very first year. These are my rubber boots that I wore, and it had little inspirational sayings on them. And I needed to see them in the last 4 hours, for sure. We did come into the finish. We did get past in that second half by two C2s, so two-person canoes passed us. They were very fit and mixed. So we ended up third overall. We were the first Voyager, and we were 47 hours and some change, yes. So the big question at the end was, would we do it again? And I kept telling my teammates, this is not the time to make this decision. You should wait a while after you have time to reflect on it before you make this decision. And I think there are two of the group who were very adamant that they would never do it again. And then there's 4 of us who have left the question to be answered still. So maybe in the future. I didn't get to see these grizzly bears, but my support crew did. So a photographer in the group took the picture. And that's my presentation, but do any of you have any questions? Yes?
Can I come next time?
Maybe, yes. Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, it'd be good to have somebody to train with.
Yeah.
In Penticton, the training was, I trained hard for this
I saw
one.
how hard you were working, and I couldn't figure out what you were up to for a long time.
Oh. Yeah, yes.
What are the bolts that actually get out of it? You bring a repair kit, do you pound the citizen?
Oh, good questions. Good questions. I'm going to take those. The boats are made out of carbon fiber. We did not have a repair kit. We did scrape that boat. We ran aground, and Andrew got up, and we were like, do we get out? He's like, no. It was near the end. He was like, no. And he just pulled that boat over the gravel bar that we got stuck on. So I know there were scrapes on the bottom of the boat, but I do think that that's kind of expected. That's not the first time we've run aground. I know other crews have run aground. And yes, we do paddle in unison, yes. When we paddle outrigger canoes, I explain it, the boat weighs 400 pounds. If I try and lift 400 pounds, I'm not gonna get very far. If you try and lift 400 pounds, you're not gonna get very far. But if we both lift 400 pounds, well, all 6 of us together, we can lift 400 pounds. So same with paddling, if you all paddle together, the boat will go much farther than if each person just paddles on their own. So yeah, it's all in unison. And I have to say, I took so much caffeine that second day, that second night, because I was so afraid of falling asleep. Because if I missed to change sides, we call hut, and then the next paddle stroke is hoe, and then you change. And I was like, oh my God, if I miss a change and stay on the side and my partner switches, then I could be the cause of us flipping. So that whole switch is all timed up and everybody has to be awake for it. Yes.
You mentioned it at the beginning. What is the frequency of the change?
I would say every 30 seconds to a minute.
That frequency?
Yes, yeah. It might go a bit longer than that, depending on that situations. In the lake, for sure, we went longer than that.
Okay.
But yeah, that frequent.
And then in one race you were in the top 5, is when you were top 3.
Yes.
And the 4 hitting you before I didn't catch what they were, the last ones was a couple of 2-person canoes, is that what it was?
For this, yeah, a 2-person
So I
canoe.
was just wondering, in that race, is that typically the quickest, is a 2-person canoe?
2-person canoe and Voyageurs are the fastest boats. Yeah, and the C4s, which are a 4-person canoe.
4-person.
Yeah, yeah, they are fast as well.
Kayaks are that.
I do think the kayaks are a little bit back. I'm not sure. 2-person kayaks can probably move quite well as well.
And there are solo canoeists as well, or no?
There is a solo canoeist category, but that's a challenge,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Even the kayaks, like,
Yeah.
we took a bus home with a bunch of other paddlers, not home, but from Dawson to Whitehorse. And one guy was a kayaker, and he said, yeah, you just feel like you're at one with the boat. And I'm like, oh my God, you just feel like you're part of the boat. Because even sliding back and forth, oh my goodness, I wanted that 3-hour break in that second half. I just wanted to stand up. And my butt was very, very sore from sliding. We got some special slidey, slippery material that wasn't breathable or soft, but slippery. So, yes.
Yeah, I noticed that in your question now.
Yes, it's my sister asking me how old the oldest person was. Yes, yes, it's not a real young person. There were some young people doing it, for sure, but you can paddle well into your senior years. Yeah. Yes, so I do think there was somebody in their 80s, and there have been people in their 80s previously. There's a woman who did it solo in a kayak, and she was into her 80s. Yes. Can you imagine?
So I went to Whitehorse the second week of July this year.
Oh.
And they were setting up for the Yukon 1000.
Right.
Do you have any desire to do that?
No. There's a little contest they have with the Yukon River Quest that if you paddle 5,000 kilometers, you get, I don't know, you get a trinket. So that was the conversation when I knew my teammates weren't done, because they were like, how many races does that? So if 1,000 contributed, I don't know.
They were staging for it, and like there was a bunch of stand-up paddleboards, and I was like, what are you guys? Because they go up into the Arctic Circle.
Yeah. No, I don't know. I have to retire. That's what I have to do before I take it off.
The 47 hours, does that include your stopping time?
No, 57 hours from start to when we finished. Good question.
47 hours of activity.
47 hours of activity. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yes, there is an entry fee. There is cash. Yeah. The cat, that's true. So the question was if there is an entry fee and if there's cash. There are very few races I've ever done where I've won cash. But this is one of them. So there is, and I think it probably helped a lot. It depends on how big the field is as well. So this year we were 60 boats, which isn't, like if they fill it all up, then the money gets better. But it was still a pretty nice chunk of cash that definitely helped. And when I look back, I did all that organizing. So when you're looking at those numbers of how much it cost to book the hotel rooms, and we stayed at a house, a beautiful large house for a few days in Whitehorse prior, and the car rentals, and it looks really pricey. But when you divide it by 6 people, it is actually, for the experience that you're getting and the time that you're away, I felt like it was quite reasonable. So, yeah, the $8,000, I was like, oh my God. But when you divide it into 6, you're like, oh, okay, this is what I would pay to go somewhere.
How much time was it from start to end, like leaving Penticton to return?
We left Penticton, I believe, on Saturday and came back on the following Monday. We came back on the following Monday. Yeah. So I think it was 8 days, 8 or 9 days from start to finish. And then we had a couple of, like when we got to Dawson City, we showered and went to bed, and then got up the next day. My sister and I and the photographer and one other guy actually drove up to Tombstone Provincial Territorial Park, and we left at 5 a.m., which is like meaningless. Time loses meaning when it's daylight all the time, right? I was like, whatever, 5 a.m., I don't care. I haven't had a full night's sleep for a while, so. But yeah, we got to be tourists a little bit. And then Dawson City is a pretty cool place to hang out, as is Whitehorse. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Were there mosquitoes or black flies?
Oh, great question.
What was it, the question?
Were there mosquitoes and black flies? And no. On the river, there's no mosquitoes. So yes, on land, there's mosquitoes, and yes, you need something to deter them. But on the river, there's none. So.
You said you didn't see the grizzlies. Did you see this guy?
I wasn't there for that photograph, but we did see foxes.
Amazing.
It was super cool. Yes, we don't get to see foxes. I know they're around in the Okanagan, but you don't see them. So.
Aren't they like wild all through the city?
Yes, they're all around. Yeah, no, it's pretty cool.
Where's that dog in Dawson at?
This, Janet, you know, Carmax. Okay, yeah. Yeah. No one asked how we go to the bathroom. You're a very polite crowd, but yes, your body figures it out. So your number 2s happen on land for the most part. And then, yeah, you just have little bailers in the boat to bail the boat in case of it taking on water, but they're also very handy to pee into, I think. So there's your trivia for the day. I think I just have a thank you slide. I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up and listening to my stories.